No one expected a wedding speech to destroy a family. The music was playing, glasses were clinking, and nearly 200 guests were smiling as my son lifted the microphone. For a moment, I believed he was about to thank me. Instead, he humiliated me in front of everyone. People laughed. Some even applauded. And in that moment, something inside me quietly broke. But what my son didn't know was that the night wasn't over. Because before the reception ended, I would walk to that same microphone and say something that would turn the entire room silent, change his future forever, and leave every guest in absolute shock. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next is something no father and no son will ever forget. Welcome to my YouTube channel Moral Ecos, where silence speaks. My son publicly humiliated me at his wedding, but my response shocked everyone. A life story told by Oliver, 65 years old. The moment my son took the microphone at his wedding reception, I thought he was about to thank me. Instead, he destroyed me. The entire hall was filled with laughter, music, and the soft clinking of glasses. Nearly 200 guests sat at beautifully decorated tables. The smell of roses and expensive perfume hung in the air. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my son's life, and I had spent 25 years preparing for it. My name is Oliver. I am 65 years old, and the night my son humiliated me in front of everyone was the night he unknowingly changed his own future forever. But before I tell you what happened at that wedding, you need to understand the life I lived to give him everything. Because sacrifices have a way of coming back around, sometimes as gratitude, and sometimes as betrayal. A father who gave everything. I wasn't born into wealth. I grew up in a small town where money was always tight and dreams were often laughed at. My father worked 12-hour shifts in a steel factory. My mother cleaned houses for families who owned more in their closets than we owned in our entire home. But despite our struggles, my parents taught me something priceless. Family comes first. And I believed that with my whole heart. When I turned 23, I married the love of my life, Sarah. Sarah had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. She wasn't interested in fancy things or expensive jewelry. All she ever wanted was a simple life filled with love. For years, we struggled together. We lived in a tiny apartment with cracked walls and a heater that barely worked in winter. I worked 2 jobs, construction during the day and security at night. Sarah worked as a school librarian. But despite the exhaustion, we were happy. And then one day, our son was born. We named him Daniel. The moment I held that tiny baby in my arms, I made a promise to myself. My son will never struggle the way I did. And for the next 40 years, everything I did was for him. The sacrifices no one saw. Raising Daniel wasn't easy. Money was always tight, but Sarah and I made sure he never noticed. When Daniel wanted a bicycle for his birthday, I worked extra shifts for 3 months. When he wanted to join a baseball team, I sold my old guitar to pay for the equipment. When he got accepted into a private school, Sarah and I stopped taking vacations completely. But we never complained, because seeing Daniel happy was enough. He was a bright kid, smart, confident, charming. Teachers loved him, friends admired him. And as he grew older, I began to believe that all our sacrifices had truly paid off. Daniel got into a good university. He studied business. After graduation, he got a job at a prestigious marketing firm in the city. The proudest moment of my life was watching him walk across that stage holding his diploma. I remember whispering to Sarah that day, "We did it." She squeezed my hand and smiled. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. 3 years later, Sarah passed away, losing my wife. Cancer, a single word that shattered everything. Sarah fought bravely for nearly 2 years. But in the end, the disease was stronger. The day she died, a part of me died with her. The house felt empty. The silence was unbearable. Daniel tried to comfort me at first. He visited occasionally, called sometimes. But his life was moving forward, and mine felt like it had stopped. Still, I never blamed him. That's what parents do. We let our children go. The woman who changed everything. 2 years after Sarah's death, Daniel called me with exciting news. He had met someone. Her name was Vanessa. He sounded happier than I had heard him in years. Of course, I wanted to meet her. The first time Vanessa came to dinner, I tried my best to welcome her warmly. But something about her felt different. Not rude. Not openly disrespectful. Just distant. She barely asked me any questions. Most of the time, she scrolled through her phone while Daniel talked. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe she was just shy. But over time, her attitude became clearer. Vanessa didn't see me as family. She saw me as an inconvenience. Still, I stayed quiet. Because Daniel loved her. And his happiness mattered more than my pride. The engagement. A year later, Daniel proposed to Vanessa. He invited me to dinner to celebrate. That night, he told me they were planning a big wedding. A very big wedding. A luxury venue. Hundreds of guests. Live band. Designer decorations. I smiled and congratulated them. But then Daniel said something that made my stomach tighten. "Dad, I was hoping you could help pay for the wedding." I had savings. Years of careful work and planning. But most of that money was meant for retirement. Still, he was my son. And without hesitation, I said yes. I ended up paying nearly $40,000 toward the wedding. I told myself it was worth it. After all, a father only sees his son marry once. Or so I thought. The wedding day. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Vanessa looked stunning in her white gown. Daniel looked proud and confident standing at the altar. As I watched them exchange vows, tears filled my eyes. I whispered quietly to Sarah in my heart, "You would be so proud of him." For a moment, everything felt perfect. But the real story began at the reception. The speech that changed everything. After dinner, it was time for speeches. The best man spoke first. Then Vanessa's father gave an emotional toast. Finally, Daniel stood up. He grabbed the microphone and smiled at the crowd. I expected him to thank me. Maybe say something about the years I spent raising him. Instead, he laughed and said the words that froze my blood. "Before I thank anyone, I should probably explain something about my dad." The room went silent. Guests turned toward me. I forced a small smile. Daniel continued. "Growing up, my dad always tried to control everything. He acted like the hero of the family, but honestly, he was just an old man who never understood how the world works." A few people chuckled awkwardly. I felt my chest tighten. But Daniel wasn't finished. He looked directly at me and said something I will never forget. "The only reason this wedding even happened is because he finally paid for something instead of complaining about money." The room exploded with laughter. Laughter at me. At that moment, I felt something inside my heart break. But what my son didn't realize was that I still had one more speech to give. And what I said next left the entire room in absolute shock. My turn to speak. Slowly, I stood up from my chair. The room was still buzzing with laughter. Daniel looked confident. Vanessa smirked slightly. But as I walked toward the microphone, the laughter began to fade. Because something in my face made people uncomfortable. I took the microphone from Daniel. My hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From disappointment. I looked around the room. Friends. Family. Strangers. Then I looked at my son. And calmly said, "My name is Oliver. I am 65 years old. And tonight I learned something very important about my son." The room became completely silent. I continued. I learned that the boy I raised no longer remembers the man who raised him. Daniel's smile slowly faded. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The truth comes out. I took a deep breath and continued speaking. "Daniel, when you were 8 years old, you wanted a bicycle. Do you remember that?" He looked confused. "Of course not," I said softly. "Because you never knew I worked 14 extra shifts to buy it." Guests began whispering. "When you joined the baseball team at 12, you thought the equipment magically appeared." I paused. "But the truth is, I sold the last gift your mother ever gave me to afford it." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa looked irritated. But I kept going. "And when you went to college," my voice cracked slightly, "your mother and I emptied our entire savings account so you could chase your dreams." The room was silent. No laughter. Only uncomfortable silence. Then I said the words that changed everything. "And tonight, I paid for the wedding where my own son chose to humiliate me." Daniel's face turned pale. But I still wasn't finished. The shocking decision. I placed my hand on the microphone stand and said calmly, "But don't worry, Daniel. You won't have to deal with me much longer." The room filled with confusion. Then I revealed the truth. Yesterday morning, I finalized a decision with my lawyer. Daniel frowned. "What decision?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said the sentence that shocked everyone. "I removed you from my will." Gasps echoed through the room. Vanessa's face went white. Daniel stared at me in disbelief. "You what?" I nodded slowly. "Every dollar I saved for this family will now go to a children's charity your mother loved." The silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Then I added one final sentence. The sentence that ended everything. Because if my own son doesn't value family, someone else's child deserves that chance instead. The lesson. I placed the microphone down and walked toward the exit. No one stopped me. No one laughed. Behind me, I could hear shocked whispers spreading through the hall. But I didn't turn around. Because for the first time in years, I felt free. Moral of the story. Respect the people who sacrificed for you. Because one day, you may realize too late that gratitude cannot be replaced. Parents give everything for their children. But respect is the one thing they should never have to beg for. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every story here leaves behind a lesson.